Okay, and thank you, Linda, for grabbing my piece of paper, because otherwise we're lost. Not too bad. Okay, so we have two questions from the Delbrook Community Association that are next, and we're going to ask all of the candidates to speak on these two questions. You each have 1 minute for each of these two questions. And my apologies for being perhaps a little bit unclear in your preparation. So the first question, and I'm going to start with Jordan and work my way this way, is do you support the form and content of the Catalyst proposal for 600 Queens, which is the new proposal for a building on the Delbrook Lands where the old Delbrook Community Association Community Center was? Why or why not?
Sure. Can I answer both parts of the question then, or just?
Yeah, because they're. If you want to put them together, you can put them together.
Okay.
And then we'll see.
Perfect. Thanks, Renee.
So then we have 2 minutes, right?
Okay, 2 minutes. Okay.
I've got 2 minutes?
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Okay. All right, so with regards to the Delbrook Lands, thanks very much for the question. First of all, I listened to all of the concerns raised at the recent public hearing, and it was nice to see such a strong turnout for that. Most of those concerns were around traffic, as well as the height of the development. I am not currently on council. I don't know the intimate details of the engagement, but to me it seems like there was an awful lot of public engagement going into this. Over 400 people, I believe, were involved. And the 3 goals that came out of it were to create non-market housing, community services, and park space. 2 of our greatest needs as a community right now are affordable housing, we've all talked about it here, and support for our seniors. This is our fastest growing demographic on the North Shore. In fact, we have 5,000 people on the North Shore, 65 plus, who are living with dementia. Our vacancy rate still sits at 0.1%, and that won't change until we commit to building affordable housing. This project is squarely aimed at both of those needs. All of that being said, I think at this point we should be deferring further progress until the new council is elected. We're only about a month away from that happening, and I don't see any benefit to having these public hearings during the election period. But those are my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Remember to introduce yourself.
Mitchell Baker, still. As far as form and content for this building, I believe it checks a bunch of our boxes. It's district leased land. It has senior respite beds. It has below market housing with a continual strength with the developer to increase the number of real low market housing rentals as it goes, as the building gets paid off. Yes, there's obviously an economy of scale as we go here, and it's very difficult to get over the fact that the building is so much larger than people originally anticipated. I don't know the answer to how to deal with that moving forward. I don't think anybody does, obviously, at this point, but I think that having a public hearing and having this being dealt with right now, unfortunately, the developer has got hundreds of thousands of dollars involved here. They are a nonprofit, and it's very difficult to ask people to sit and wait, but hopefully they'll bear with us as we move through this process, because we need some patience and the community needs some time. Thank you.
I'm going to answer both questions at the same time. Matthew Bond. The award-winning 2-year-long Delbrook Community Dialogue process identified the need for a neighborhood park, affordable housing, childcare, and seniors respite on this site. The CARE BC and Catalyst proposal delivers both the desperately needed seniors respite facility and 80 affordable homes in an aging and increasingly unaffordable community. During the process, I've heard concerns from neighbors about the height of the building, residents parking on local streets, vehicle access, neighborhood character, and shade on the tennis courts. Based on the financial plan recently passed by council, the neighborhood park is planned to be designed in 2019 and built in 2020. I would encourage all citizens of our community to attend the public hearing on October 11th and have their opinions heard by council. I do not see an issue with continuing the public consultation process during the election period. There will be a new mayor and at least 2 new councillors in November. Those individuals will have to review the public hearing binder and the additional background materials when they make their decision at 2nd and 3rd reading in November, so choose wisely. There are consequences to delay. The capital and operational funding for the Care BC Seniors Respite Centre is time limited. If a decision is not made before the end of the year, the funding may be gone, and neither the care facility or the affordable homes will be built. We've recently heard during the Kiwanis project in Lynn Valley that every month of delay adds $100,000 of cost to these types of projects, which directly impacts the amount of affordability and rent that we can provide to potential residents.
Hi, Megan Kern, still, and again. So I was reading through the 2016 dialogue that was put together, and I do have an understanding of the history of this project, and it does seem like in that dialogue there was a 4-story, that was what was discussed. And I know personally from some interactions with council, it's challenging when there is this community dialogue, but you feel like somewhere it leaves and then it comes back as something that's not what you saw. And I think that can create some mistrust and confusion among people, and it also feels like you're not being listened to. I completely understand the urgent need for the respite center and the affordable housing. I think we still need to do a better job of defining affordability, making sure that it's tied to income, not to the market. And I think that one thing that came up again and again was that it should be family units, and there's a number of 1-bedroom and studio units, and it seems like in the area that has schools close by, it makes sense for it to be more family focused. And I know from the 2 demo evictions that have happened, those are a lot of larger units that we need to be looking to replace. The second part of the question, I can't now find.
Can you see any issue with continuing the public hearing?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I kind of likened trying to keep up with the development game as the combination of the amazing development race and Where's Waldo, like trying to find the signs for where developments were happening and then reading through 800 pages agendas. I found it quite overwhelming as someone who really wanted to be engaged in the process. So I think that now with councilors that are running, it's not the best time to, and they're not going to be able to prove it anyway. So I would like to see the process be able to meaningfully engage everyone that wants to be involved. So, thank you.
I'm Phil DePacchia. Fundamentally, I do not support the Catalyst proposal as it stands. I choose instead to stand with the community in opposition to it. The specifics for my personal concern with the project range from the height of the proposed structure to the lack of a promised daycare and pet park. But more fundamentally, somehow, somewhere, the blessing of our community has been lost. This is often characterized as NIMBYism, but I think that's an easy way to dismiss valid concerns of residents, and until those concerns are addressed, I will stand with them. Until the community is once again on board and excited by the proposal, I will stand with them in opposition. We need to give those most affected a voice at the table. They're reasonable people who want what is best for the area. Continuing the process during the election is effectively curtailing the community's ability to communicate. That means no flyers, as has been done in the past. That means people who will not get the information in the manner that they are used to. That means there will likely be people left out of the loop. This isn't the democracy I believe in. On October 20th, please vote for me, Phil DePacchia, to have your voice heard.
Hi again. Oh, cannot see these. Okay, there. Okay, I'm Linda Findlay. So overall, I support the premise of Catalyst development. The need for elder respite care and rental housing is sorely needed in the district and on the North Shore in general. From reading the public input statements and watching the public hearings, it is quite apparent that the community has more than a few issues with the scope of the project. If the rezoning decision is moved forward to the new council to consider, it is clear that we will need to revisit some of these issues. The planning of the project does follow and fits within the OCP guidelines. I am confident, however, that there is room for some modifications. I believe that we should be continuing with the public hearing process during the election period. All mayor and council candidates have access to all reports, public input, and videos and hearings, and should be familiar with this issue as we wind our way to the election day. And hopefully, like myself, they're doing their homework. It is important to remember that the funding dollars from higher levels of government that will support the respite care and rental housing are available for a finite period and have an expiration date. If, as a council and a community, we cannot reach consensus within a reasonable period of time, this funding will disappear. We will then have lost the opportunity for our community to provide these sorely needed services and housing. I, for one, would not want to see that happen. If elected, I would make this project and further public hearings on it a priority. We must continue to work together and not lose sight of the opportunities we have to get this right and ensure that we provide the amenities that are vital to the sustainability of our community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and for taking the time to listen to my thoughts. Linda Findlay.
Hi, Mark Elliott. For me, this election has been about talking to people and collecting opinions, and sometimes it affects you. I'm going to tell you a story about somebody that I met who was from Deep Cove and was displaced from the Lions facility when there was a fire there. And it was a heartbreaking story. She's moved 7 times since that fire, and she's been unable to find permanent accommodation. And I don't care who you are, if you hear that type of a story, it affects you. We need affordable housing in North Vancouver, and this facility is one of the facilities that can help alleviate some of those things. So I'm generally in favor of the concept of this facility. The respite care will provide, ease the burden on some caregivers sometimes, and so the proposal is good the way it is. I know that you can't dismiss the concerns of the residents either, though. I think we would have done ourselves a whole lot of favors if the park had been dealt with at the same time, because at one of the public hearings I heard a lot of people talking about the park. If I could write it in blood that I'd be in favor of the park, I would. And I think that anybody that says they're in favor of it and then voted against it later would have a heavy price to pay for that. So I'm generally in favor of, but again, residents' concerns over some of the things like the height can't simply be dismissed. I'm also in favor of continuing the public hearing process while this is going on, because like other candidates have said, everybody's got access to the information. The vote is going to be after the election anyway with a new council, and so everybody will be in possession of all of the facts once that's done. So anyway, thanks very much for listening to my story. And again, Mark Elliott, thank you very much.
Hi, Betty Forbes. I misinterpreted the instructions and thought I had 30 seconds for each question. So my answers are pretty short and sweet. Lift the mic up. Lift the mic up. I support the idea of a respite care on the facility on the North Shore, as it's the first one that will ever be on the North Shore, and it's needed as we are an aging population. However, I went back and looked at the district dialogue reports from the community, and their priorities seemed to be the height, and also that they wanted a park and they wanted childcare and daycare. I'm in favor of the park. I know that the childcare is there on lease for another 5 years from now, and maybe the park should be called Bell House. I'm not sure. I do not support, however, the height and the massing of this building or the mix of units. I've already spoken in front of council before saying that I didn't support it going forward at this moment because I think the communications between council and the community have broken down and we need to repair that. The second question, I do not agree with the present council continuing to make decisions, pass bylaws, or hold open hearings during the campaign period of an election. This is unprecedented in the District of North Van. I actually phoned BC Elections and was told they are within their rights to do so. It is at their discretion, however. There are 4 incumbent councillors running for re-election. I ask you to remember on election day who the 2 incumbent councillors are that wanted to keep pushing through business during the election period. Please remember to vote for Betty Forbes on October 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Very forward. I'm going to answer the second question first, kind of extend where Betty was going. Yes, I do see an issue with continuing the public hearing and the process during an election period. We have incumbent council members who, by the very nature, must keep an open mind while the public hearing is open. Doesn't make any sense to me during an active election period. We want to know where they stand on projects like this before we vote for them. We need to know that. And number two on this, the fact that this is open, I think that it limits the communication activities of the Delbrook Community Association and other community groups whose communication with its members could be seen as an election expense. So I think that it's problematic, and we should just be holding off until the next council is sworn in. My answer regarding my support for the Catalyst proposal, when I spoke at the public hearing on the proposal several weeks ago, my answer is the same as it is today. The community looks at the site and they want things to move ahead. It's been a long time that that piece of property has been up and being talked about. The park is a near and dear pursuit for the community. In its present form, though, it would set a precedent for future development along Queens at 6 stories. From my perspective, it's just simply too high. It will set the tone for the entire roadway. The concept of providing much-needed respite care and rental housing is wonderful. You can't argue against it. We need it. But however, CARE BC's funding, I spoke to the folks, they want this to go ahead, and they're going to be patient, I suspect. We can't hold a gun against our heads just because we're waiting for some funding. We need to do this right for the community. And, you know, there are a number of things, in addition to the height, of course, the family nature. Thank you. Very forward.
Hello, I'm Jim Hansen. Because I am a sitting councillor currently participating in the process of rezoning with an open public hearing and in a quasi-judicial role, and have a requirement to keep an open mind and not engage in prejudgment, which could disqualify a councillor from ongoing deliberation on the project, I believe it's inappropriate for me to speak specifically with respect to the details of 600 West Queens. I can say that I support seniors' respite care. My mother died of dementia during my council term. I'm well versed in the need for seniors' respite care. My support for affordable housing is well stated. I can say, though, generally, I'm not a fan of height, especially outside of the town centers. And I am a person who believes we ought to seek consensus as we move forward and ensure where possible, it's not always possible, but where possible our decisions are arrived at with community support. Moving on to the issue of continuing rezoning during the election, I think much of what I said indicates that I think it is not ideal. I think it has the potential to limit participation and debate. I don't see how we're going to be able to vote on this during this council term, which means we're going to have to attempt to port the public hearing process into the next council. And as a lawyer, I find this problematic. The idea that a hearing can take place, it's like a judge just watching a video and saying, well, he's guilty. In my experience, that's not the way it works, because when you're in a public hearing, you have the right to ask questions, you're looking at the person's body language and participating and so forth. At a minimum, I say we're going to need to continue the public hearing into the next council term. I believe it would have been preferable. I appreciate the challenges involved, but it would be preferable from a procedural point of view to have terminated and commenced again. So those are my comments.
Just before I go on to that subject, because family things and grandkids for the hospital, I didn't manage to get my things out to everybody, so if anybody wanted to see my brochure thing here, then please contact me after. Regarding 600 West Queens, I don't fully know the whole thing. I missed the previous public hearing. I'm hoping to go to the October 11th one. Let's hope it is moved back to the next current council. so many things are said in there that look appropriate, you know, respites and all this. I know, as far as I understand, you really want a park situation there in Delbrook here, and I feel very awkward to make a decision on another area. I don't like to tell you guys what you should have or shouldn't have, okay? I would love to see you guys get hold of the Delbrook Community Association, get hold of them, get into them, and for them to bring forward a report, please, for that public hearing, so we can get really what the focus is and learn what you people in Delbrook really want overall on a percentage. If it's a heavy percentage, okay, but there we go, that's all I can say. And I wish these people would actually, behind me, are not incumbents, would come in front of council and speak at the public input. I got it from 2 minutes to 3 minutes for you guys back in 2013. You go back 2017, you've never seen them in front of a camera, never see what they're talking about. Thank you.
Like Barry, I'm going to answer the second question first. As a sitting councillor, I don't see any point in carry on with this hearing as it's proposed. This present council will not be voting on it, and enough questions have arisen that need to be answered. Personally, I would either defer the continuation until early November, or start a fresh hearing at that date if there is a majority of new councillors on the new council. On the catalyst proposal, again, to repeat comments already, I have to keep an open mind at this time because we are going through a public hearing process. And this development seeks to provide both seniors respite care and affordable housing. We are urgently trying to provide affordable housing throughout the district through an allocation of district land valued at many millions of dollars as our contribution, and that comes from taxpayers' money. We have 3 sites under active progress in partnership with housing societies and government grants. Construction costs are escalating and government funding is limited. It's released in tranches, and you've got to be first in line in the queue to access some of that. The catalyst proposal has come under criticism in terms of height, footprint, and unit composition, and the impact on the neighbourhood in terms of traffic, etc. And I think that these need to be responded to before moving ahead. I'm personally not sure how we balance the absolute need for respite care and affordable housing with a local community which seems to be rejecting this proposal as it stands. Sometimes consensus is not always possible, and council has to make tough decisions. I don't think we're going to make a decision before the election, but early in November we're going to have to make a tough decision on this proposal.
Hello, Joanne Morton for Council. I'd like to say that I'm in favor, of course, of affordable housing and respite care. But there are many community concerns as to the height and unit makeup of this development. With the 5 stories, plus another for parking and another for mechanical placements, this effectively makes up a 7-story structure. I think also if this proposal is about respite care, which is to provide relief for the caregiver. Okay, that's what respite care is for the caregiver. I think a lot of us will be caregivers soon. There could be more attention paid to the details for this, such as a safe drop-off zone. Just picture canes and wheelchairs and walkers, and caregivers in need of a break and stopping in the traffic on Queens to drop off grandma. So I think a little bit more care needs to be done in what this unit is actually for. As to whether public hearings should be done during election time, I think with elections coming now every 4 years, and we know the date of them, I would suggest we could set schedules for development applications and public hearings with a window to block off to allow for the election period to have room to focus on the broad concerns across the North Shore. Thank you.
I'm going to do the second question first too. This hearing has been cursed from the beginning. Just before the summer, a fire alarm went off and the hearing didn't even begin. Then it came back just before an election, and now it's been deferred. It's coming back on the 11th, which is next week, and Councillor Hanson and I won't be there because we have been invited by a neighborhood to come and talk about the election. So this is completely inappropriate. I'm in my 8th election, and we have never ever conducted district business hearings or considered contentious issues during a campaign. I find this process to be a distraction during this election period and highly